Hey guys, how you going? In this video I'll be showing you how to create a bottom floating navigation bar from scratch using plain HTML and CSS. So what I mean by floating bottom navigation bar is essentially something like this on the bottom here. So we'll be creating this right here, this bottom bar in this video. As we can see, we have support for some text on the left side, a couple of links, and also on the right side here we've got a clickable sub menu. So this is also going to float above everything else as you scroll down the page. So we'll be creating this right here in this video, and it's going to be pure CSS, so no JavaScript is required to achieve this, and it's also going to be responsive and mobile friendly. So inside this tab right here, we're going to start from scratch. So let's go inside the text editor and we can begin by creating a CSS file to hold all of the CSS styles for the bottom navigation bar. So let's make a new file here and call this bnav.css. We can of course then link this to the HTML file inside the head by saying link CSS and just referring to, of course, that bnav.css file. So now we're going to work on the HTML, and essentially as usual I like to show the HTML for each component and then work on the CSS after that. So let's go down here and create a new nav element with a class of bnav. And basically this right here is going to represent the navigation bar as a whole and be the main container for the navigation bar. We can then just save this, and I do want to straight away here create or insert some text into the navigation bar. So basically I want to put some HTML to represent this logged in as dcode on the bottom. So for this, it's going to be really straightforward. Back inside here, let's create a new div with a class of bnav__item. So essentially each one of these separate bodies of text or links or sub menu links, they're all going to be considered to be a bnav item. Okay, and as usual I'm using the block element modifier or BEM CSS naming convention, so bnav__item, but you can of course name these classes whatever you like. Anyway, within the bnav item I'm gonna say just something like logged in as dcode and just wrap dcode inside a strong tag. Okay, so now we can stop here just for now and go inside the CSS to apply some styles, but first I want to save this and refresh the browser, and we can see we get this right here. So let's now head inside the CSS and begin work on the styling. So firstly, I want to target the body and give it a margin bottom of 50 pixels. This is just an approximate value, just to make room for the navigation bar, so you don't get text on the bottom here hidden behind the navigation bar. If you didn't put the margin bottom, then eventually you would end up with something like this where text gets cut out just below here. So definitely include that margin bottom. Obviously depending on your own project or situation, this value might change, but for me 50 pixels works perfectly fine. So now we can move on to actually styling up the bnav navigation bar. So let's target the bnav class, and firstly and most importantly give it a position of fixed, and this is of course going to allow it to float above everything else on the web page as you scroll down. I also want to give it a bottom of 0 and a left of 0 to basically just position it in the bottom left corner. Along with this, I want to say width and guarantee that the width is going to be 100% across the whole page. And I also want to set a font family of sans serif and a font size of 13 pixels. Of course, once again, these values are going to change for your own scenarios. Also want to set a different text color. Let's make this a dark gray, and a background which is going to be a light gray. Also a border top of 1 pixels, and then solid, and then triple C. Along with that, also a box shadow of 0, 0, 2 pixels RGBA, 0, 0, 0, 0.25. Now, of course, you may not like the box shadow, and maybe you just want to go for the border, or maybe just the box shadow. Completely up to you. I think this looks not bad. So now I want to save this and refresh so we can see our progress, and we get something like this. So now we can move on to styling up each one of these items. So let's go back inside here and target the class of bnav__item. And all of these items are going to share the same base styles, and that is going to be, firstly, a position of relative. The reason for this positioning here is because without this, the sub menu items are not going to work, because we're going to be using a position of absolute for the child items in order to position them correctly. So definitely include this here for the sub menus. Also, a padding of 10 pixels, a float of left. Now I am going to be using floats for the positioning of these items, because unfortunately I couldn't find a flex only solution, but hey, floats work perfectly fine in this scenario for essentially allowing us to position some items on the left and some items on the right. Okay, an outline of none. This is just to remove some of the default blue outlines you may get on mobile devices or even desktops when you are focusing on a bnav item. Once again, this is more for the sub menu items. Okay, and lastly, a display of block. Although in this case, obviously, divs are going to be blocked by default. If you do choose to use a span or an A tag for your items, then this is going to guarantee they display as a block. Okay, so now I'm going to save this here and refresh once again, and we can see we get this right here. So obviously, looking not too bad so far. Now I do want to add a new rule set for displaying this item on the right side, or any items on the right side, and for this we're going to be using a modifier class. So back inside here, let's just grab this class and say dash dash right, and this is going to be called a modifier class for the bnav item, hence the dash dash, and for this we're going to say float and make this right. So now let's go back inside here and just create a new item and create this one, and just say for this bnav item and make this dash dash right. So now saving this and refreshing, we should see one on the left and then of course one on the right. Perfect. So now we can move on to styling and creating these links. So it's going to be really straightforward. So back inside here, let's just remove this right class and go back to the left side, and inside here, instead of this text, we can instead create a new A tag with an href of hash. So we go back to the current page and give it a class of bnav__link. And this will be the base class for all the links used inside the bottom navigation bar. Inside here we can say, for example, frequently asked questions, and then we can go inside the CSS here and create a new rule set for the bnav link. Just like this, and for this we're going to be including one style, and that's going to be color, and we can say for this 4F65 and then 77. This is going to be a really light grayish blue. I'm going to save this here and refresh again, and we can see we get this right here. So now we're going to work on creating the sub menu, or the clickable sub menu on the right side here. So for this, let's go inside the HTML and of course work on that first. So inside here, let's create a new div just below this one. This will be a bnav item, of course, and it's going to also have a bnav item dash dash right, so it belongs on the right side. And inside here we can say, for example, settings as the display text for this clickable sub menu. And then below here, we can create a new unordered list with a class of bnav underscore underscore submenu. Okay, so this right here is of course a new element for our classes. Okay, and then inside here, we can create each one of our individual links to be used for the submenu. So these are going to be called submenu items. So let's make a new li right here and give it a class of bnav submenu item just like this. And then inside here, we can of course create a new anchor or new anchor tag. So we can say a with a class of bnav underscore underscore link, and then we can leave it at that just for now and give it an href of hash just like above, so we go back to the current page if we decide to click on it. For the text, let's just say profile for example. So this right here, we have the main item for the clickable sub menu. We have the display text. Then we have just right here the actual sub menu items themselves represented using an unordered list, and of course some li tags down here. So we've introduced two new classes, submenu and submenu item. So now let's just copy and paste this li a couple more times to give us a few more links to work with. So let's say, for example, server settings as a second link. Let's give a name of theme, updates, and finally we can just say log out. So now saving this and refreshing is going to give us this right here. So now we can move on to styling up the actual submenu itself, and essentially we're going to be positioning it so it appears on the top of this navigation bar right here. So back inside the CSS, let's go ahead now and target the bnav underscore underscore submenu class, and firstly and most importantly give it a position of absolute. So now we can see why we needed to use position relative up here. If we didn't use this, then the positioning down here is not going to be how we expect it to be. Also a bottom, and we can give this a value of calc 100% plus 10 pixels. This is going to make it 10 pixels higher than the navigation bar. Maybe you don't want to have this 10 pixel gap. In that case, just say 100% for your bottom. Along with this, we can say right and make this 10 pixels as well. These two values should be the same in order to get the exact same spacing for each one of your between navigation bar and your sub menu. If once again, if you don't want to use the gap, just have right with a value of 0. We're also going to say margin and make this 0 to remove some default margining set on the unordered list by default, and also a padding of 5 pixels top and bottom, and 0 for left and right, and also a minimum width of 150 pixels. Okay, we can go ahead now and also give it a background of a light gray. And a box shadow of 0.05 pixels RGBA, and do the same thing as what we did earlier. That should be pretty straightforward, and we can now save this and then refresh, and we can see we get this right here. So as you can see, that is that 10 pixel gap between the edges here. So now we can move on to styling up each one of these individual sub menu items. So for this, let's go back inside here and target the class of course bnav submenu and then item. Firstly, let's give it a list style type of none to remove the default circle bullets next to each one of the items, and a padding of 5 pixels top and bottom, and then 8 for the left and right. I also want to say when these sub menu items get hovered over, I want to change the background color. So we can say background and just make this something like DC, DC, and then DC. So now saving this and refreshing gives us something like this, and now of course we can hover over each one of these items. However, I do want to change how the links work here. That way I can click on this side right here and the link is still going to work. I also want to remove the underline on each one of these links. So for this, let's go back inside here and just create a new class, or add a new class to each one of these links, and it's going to be a modifier class called full width. So we can say bnav link full dash width, okay, and then inside here we can of course just add that class to the CSS. We can just say something like this, dash dash full dash width, and then we can make the display for this a block, and also we can of course just remove the text decoration by saying text decoration then none. Okay, so now saving this and refreshing of course gives us something like this, so definitely looking a lot better with those styles. Okay, so now we can actually work on getting the submenu to appear only when we click on this settings. So for this, let's go back inside here and firstly just set the display of the submenu to be none by default. So we can say display and just make this none. So now of course on page load they are not displayed by default. So now we can work on actually getting this to be focused or active. So basically make it so when we click on the settings it gets a dark gray background color. So for this we need to go inside the HTML first and give the actual div here with the settings a value of tab index and give it an attribute of tab index with a value of 0. So basically by setting this tab index attribute you are saying that the div can be focused or it is focusable. Now with this being said, it means that we can now use the focus pseudo class within the CSS to actually do things when the item gets clicked on. So let's go up to the bnav item section and just copy and paste this, and we can give it a focus pseudo class just like this by saying :focus, and inside here we can just say a cursor of pointer. Okay, and we also want to say a background of just a different color gray, a bit darker to what it currently is. So now saving this and refreshing is going to give us this right here. If I was to now click on it, we can see it is now a darker shade of gray, and of course we also get that cursor. You know what, I might actually put the cursor on the actual item itself. So let's just go up here and just say something like this. I did forget to mention that I was going to use a class for this. So let's just essentially change this to be bnav item dash dash clickable. So my mistake, sorry about that guys. Instead use this class for bnav item clickable. Okay, and I'll just copy and paste this right here, and for this one we can set the cursor. So putting this inside here works in a very similar fashion. However, this time we need to add this class to all of our clickable links. So back inside here, let's just go ahead now and add this class to the bnav item. Okay, so with this class being added, we are then saying, of course, for all of those clickable links, give it a different cursor, and also when they get focused, change their background. Okay, so now saving this and refreshing, we should now only see the cursor for the clickable links, and of course they also turn with a darker background, and for these ones they don't get the different cursor. Okay, cool. So now we can move on to actually displaying the sub menu. So for this, it'll work in a very similar fashion using the focus pseudo class. Okay, so let's go inside here, and we are going to say for this, just below this rule set, we're going to say bnav item, and we can say :focus. Okay, then we can say a direct child of bnav sub menu. So essentially what we're saying here is when one of these bnav items gets focused, we want to select the direct child, which is a bnav sub menu. And for this, we can say display and make it block, of course, toggling from the default display of none just down here. Okay, so in the HTML, we can see we have this bnav item, and when it gets focus, we're going to be selecting the unordered list with a class of bnav sub menu. So it's a direct child of this item. And then of course we are changing this to be display with a value of block to of course make it appear. Okay, so now saving this and refreshing gives us this right here. And also, of course, if I was to click away, the item loses focus, so it goes back to its default value of none for the display property. Now, this looks like it's working. However, there is one minor issue with this design, and that is if I was to go back inside here and give, for example, the profile link a value of something like, let's just say assets, and then dcode.css to reference my dcode CSS file. Let's save this and refresh and then try to click on the profile. We can see it doesn't actually work. So the reason for this, I believe, is that as soon as you click away from the item, it loses focus, so you don't actually get a chance to click on the link. So to get around this, we need to set one more CSS property on the bnav sub menu. So back inside here, let's target the bnav sub menu once again, and we're going to say for this, we're going to say hover. So basically, as long as you are hovering over the bnav sub menu, want to make the display and set it to block. That way it is always going to be blocked when you're hovering over it, and that should get around the link issue. So let's give it a comment to say to ensure sub menu links work. Okay, so now saving this and refreshing, trying it one more time, we can see now the profile still works, and we go to the actual link destination. So that right there is how you can create a floating bottom navigation bar using pure HTML and CSS. Thank you for watching, guys, and I'll see you later.